Hello, my name is Matthew, and I'm reading Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë for the month of February as a read along. And today I'll be talking about chapters 12 through 22, and I'm reading it slower than I had expected. I'm really enjoying it. It's a beautiful, strange, haunting novel with so many surprises. There have been so many really unexpected events that really drive me to read more and wonder where is the life of Jane Eyre going, and where is the novel going? How is the story going to be proceeding? The first 12 chapters are Jane Eyre's youth and her formative years, and the reading that I've done recently this past week is now her as a young lady in this haunting house, and the big event of at least the beginning of these chapters is the appearance of Mr. Rochester. And so we have Jane Eyre, and she is a tutor for this precocious French girl, and there's the kind of the manager of the house, and everything does seem quite pleasant. The people that she's meeting are finally much more engaging than so many of the relationships that she has had as a child and a young girl. And it's still strange. There's a haunting, unnerving atmosphere in this house, and the way that it is written. There's a moment, there was a line where later on in the book, there's a party of gentlemen that come to the house, and it's being described. And there was a line where it says they played billiards in the billiard room. And so it has that ornate language, and also a hyper articulate way of speaking. But a line like that could still sound redundant. They played billiards in the billiards room, as if we might think they were playing billiards in the bowling alley. But when we were introduced into this house, we didn't get a full, complete description the way that Balzac might do, where before the story even starts, we know the decor and the layout of the entire house. And instead, we have a moment where we're told they're playing billiards in the billiard room, and now we know that there's a billiard room. The reason I bring this up is one of the elements that adds so much of a haunting environment in this house and in this book is it feels like we're constantly surprised and constantly turned around with new information. There's characters that appear as if we've already met them, even when it's their introductory moment. At least for me, maybe I wasn't reading it as closely, but the woman that lives on the upper story, she wasn't introduced so much as mentioned as if it's a character that I should already know. And there were so many moments where I was taken aback and going, well, now who is this person? And all of the effects that can make something feel haunting, not knowing where you are, not knowing the people that you're interacting with, um, being in a situation where there's characters talking as if you should know them, and it's the first time that you have seen them, is a great effect. And not that the billiards line was purposely built like that, but I do think it's a characteristic trait that comes throughout so many of the pages, and especially this section that I read this week, chapters 12 through 22. But we meet Mr. Rochester, and I've heard the name. It's one of the few parts of this novel that I had some passing idea about, and the moment that they meet, when he's on horseback, Jane is, I think, if I remember correctly, delivering a letter. So she left the house, and she's on this long walk to go to a nearby village. And there's this man on a horse, and he hits an ice patch, and the horse goes down, he goes down, he's pinned. Jane goes over, and with a little bit of back and forth, is able to unpin him. He sprains his ankle. They have a very short, very terse, abrupt conversation. There's a little bit of interrogation, and off he goes. He even asked, where do you live? What do you do?" And Jane is answering him, and he is being nondescript. He's not saying, "Oh, well, that's my house. You're in my you're in my employ." Nothing like that. When Jane, Daphne's about to jump. Jump! Come on. Jane gets back to the house. All of this is now revealed, and their first interaction in the home, Rochester is upset. He's physically in pain. He's sprained his ankle. There's a great line. He's talking to the housekeeper and said, "This is the woman that felled my horse." I thought that was great. And he asks if she's a witch. And when Jane saw him on the walk and saw this lone horseman, in a passing fancy, wondered if he was a ghost or apparition himself. And in the house, when they have a conversation where they both know their role, he brings up she was a witch that created this ice. And witches and ghosts and goblins, apparitions, specters, phantoms, sprites, elves, all of these otherworldly creatures are constantly evoked. They're spoken about, they're mentioned. At one point, Mr. Rochester goes under the guise of a witch. He's in disguise in an episode during the party scene. But Mr. Rochester's character is fascinating. At first, he is so discreetly unlikable. He's determined to be broody, moody, commanding and demanding, and unattractive. It's an interesting detail that Jane and Mr. Rochester are both often mentioned me see if I can get Andy in the picture. I think that's better. Both often mentioned to be a little unappealing physically wise. It does add a lot. This is not just a typical romance where Jane is beautiful, Mr. Rochester is handsome. Instead, they're both a little unbecoming. Of course, Jane starts warming up to him. They have these strange conversations. There's a moment where Mr. Rochester is a little drunk and he's asking about his appearance. He's asking, is it okay the way that he addresses her? Jane, always shown to be strong-willed, is giving straightforward answers, and there's a little, there's tension. There's an abrasion between these two. That friction becomes chemistry. Jane anyway, finds out that she's either in love. She's in love with him. She can't stop thinking about him. The times that he's in the house, ignoring her, talking to other people, not casting his eye in her direction, she's constantly aware of it. We have the moment where the woman in the upper story really makes her introduction, and it's the night before. It's late at night. Jane can't sleep. She hears a familiar, eerie laughter. It awakens her and forces herself into the hallway. She sees Mr. Rochester's door ajar. She investigates. There's smoke. She enters the bedroom. The bed is ablaze. The bed is on fire. Mr. Rochester is in the bed, passed out, asphyxiated by smoke. There's water basins. She starts dumping water on him to put out the mattress that's been in cinders. Mr. Rochester, when he finally comes to, says, "Jane, are you trying to drown me?" Which was such a great line, a bit of humor, the reversal. It's fire and it's water, and Mr. Rochester knows what's going on. The house becomes alive. He gets everyone back into bed, dismisses Jane, and the next day, when Jane is expecting to have a conversation, talk about what happened, the little bit of explanation that Mr. Rochester offered was obtuse, vague and obscure. He's gone for like 2 weeks. That's when he comes back with the party of people. And that's when Mr. Rochester dresses up as a witch, and there's that whole scene. And then there's another bloody, shrieking night in the household where there was a visitor, Mason, who came to the house after the party with all of these people, and there's a cry of bloody murder. Jane and Mr. Rochester are in this room. There's a man bleeding out. He has wounds. He has bite marks. Mr. Rochester leaves to get medical help and locks Jane in this room to tend to him with rags and water and salts. And she's trying to figure out what on earth is going on in this house. What is the story? Everyone heard the clamoring, or actually, the first time. But anyway, and it is one aspect of all of this. The dialogue really doesn't make any sense. There have been so many things where the conversation, and in any normal human interaction, would be, your bed was on fire. What happened? There's a man upstairs that just got bitten. Just what exactly happened? And the obscure, vague bits of intrigue would just be stomped over. Well, no, just what exactly is happening here? Of course, a large element of that is creating the tension and suspense for the reader, which is magnificently employed. The ornate language, the long, long conversations that just don't answer simple questions is a little frustrating, especially when you want to know. It's like, but what's going on here? And we have Jane leaving at the same time that Jane has found that she's passionate and in love with Mr. Rochester. It's these new swelling emotions, while every indication shows that Mr. Rochester is now courting another woman, Miss Ingalls, I think. She goes back to her past, but when she comes back, it's a whole episode that I'll gloss over. Mr. Rochester is just a new kind of character. The way that he's talking to Jane, he just seems romantic and strange. That's really where I am now. It's not clear that he's actually marrying anybody, at least to me. There's still mystery afoot in the house. And all of those surprises, all of those unexpected events, are really, it's just great. It really is just great. I have no idea where the story is going. This is my first read. Does the rest of the novel take place in the house? Does Jane leave and move on to other adventures the way that the first two main acts were structured? Is it a love story? What's going on with this lady upstairs setting beds on fire and biting people? Is she the one that is doing it? Is there going to be a real ghost? It's just fascinating. I'm completely absorbed in pretty much every level that I could judge a book by. The characterization, the setting, the story up to this point, the way that it's being described, the beauty of the language, the strangeness and eeriness built into the language. It's just beautifully written. So there's some of my thoughts on chapters 12 through 22. If you're reading along, please let me know what you think. If you've read it before, please let me know what you think. Um, Anything that I had to say, please let me know. So, thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you'd like, and take care.